Hello, everyone. Welcome to Founding Without Funding podcast. This is episode 1. And what we will do is go ahead and start with the basics of what Founding Without Funding is. We'll talk about that today, both the book, the course, and of course, this podcast. And then later in some different episodes, we'll start having guests on and all that kind of good stuff. But today, we'll go ahead and just talk about what Founding Without Funding is. Now, my origin story, my name is Kyle Hiersche, and I've founded over 10 businesses, and some of them do multi-millions of dollars in sales per year. Now, I did that without using outside investors and outside capital. So that's really what founding without funding is about, is how to take an idea or maybe your existing business and either start it or grow it without waiting on investors. One thing that I've always done is not waited, right? I really hate sitting back, making a pitch deck, hoping that someday somebody is going to invest. What I like to do is go ahead and get the business running. Maybe I invest a little bit of my own money in when I can, or maybe I start getting sales and I sell it before I buy it. Either way, I don't like sitting around waiting for funding, and I don't think other people should either. If you have an idea, if you have a business, I think you should get out there and go ahead and execute that business. And so that's what Founding Without Funding is about. I have the book, I have the course, and we will be doing this podcast on a daily basis to talk not only with myself, but also with other business owners and founders on how you can start or grow your business and focus on doing that without capital. Now, does everyone start their business and grow their business without capital? Not necessarily, but that's what we're going to be talking about here for the most part, as well as some general business advice, motivation, and inspiration, essentially. So in the book, I talk a lot about how you do not need to wait on anybody besides your customers, right? So one of the foundations of founding without funding is essentially having your customers pay you, right? You can test an idea in the market and get your customers to actually fund your ideas as opposed to an investor. I talk about a situation where there's two different founders. One of them is the founder that goes out there and starts marketing their product, starts getting sales with the minimal viable product, which is what we will talk about on another episode as well and go more into depth on that. But in the book, I talk about the story of two different founders. And one of them is a founder that goes out there, gets things going without waiting on an investor. And the other founder is somebody who makes pitch decks, gets all of the information, makes spreadsheets, which are really just a bunch of speculation, right? So any business owner knows that when you are out there and you are trying to actually make your business run, it's going to change on a daily basis. Everything you thought about how this business was going to go is going to change as you actually execute your business plan. And a lot of the times, your entire business plan will change. And even sometimes, your entire business will change. So, sitting around making spreadsheets, having pitch decks, imagining how all of this is going to play out, it really does nothing, because once you get into the actual business, most things are going to change. So I talk about that story of the two founders. One of them goes out there and actually does things, gets a couple customers, learns from their experience, changes their business accordingly, takes that feedback to earn more sales, reinvest those into the company, start building what they have. And then you have the other founder who is waiting for an investor, and they're sitting there making all their predictions and all their spreadsheets and their pitch decks, and they're going to different investors. And nowadays, a lot of times they might just be using LinkedIn and contacting people over and over again, which we all know is not really going to do much. And these people are more so, I feel like, afraid to actually get out there and do it. And so the tale of the two founders there is that by the end of a couple of months, founder one already went out there, made some sales, proved their business model, maybe tweaked it in order to actually get some sales, use the feedback from those to then, actually create new products or, tune in what they have, or fine tune, I guess I should say, what they have. And then the other founder is still at step one, right? So months later, one founder is already built a business, has already created the miracle of the product responding to, excuse me, the market responding to a product and purchasing it, which we'll talk about later is, what I like to call a mini miracle, right? To put a product out there, to put an idea out there and have the market respond by purchasing it, that is the validation that you're looking for. And so founder number one has that validation already. They went out there and did the work to make it happen. Founder number two is still at step one because all they have is a pitch deck and maybe some predictions and some spreadsheets that really don't mean anything once you get into it. And investors know this, right? So you have one person who has a business that's up and running, and maybe there's not very many sales. Maybe the sales sound very bad. Maybe you think you'd rather have no sales and be pre-revenue. Some people joke about that. I'd rather be pre-revenue to try to get an investment than to show a small amount of sales. But that's not really how the world works, right? An investor is going to want to see that you've proven out your idea more than a nice pitch deck, more than a grand idea, more than a spreadsheet that extrapolates out numbers that you don't really know or understand, right? So at the end of these few months, founder number one has proven that they can make at least a sale and has fine tuned their business, got it up and running, probably has their socials and website going and all that kind of stuff, as to where founder number two is still in the same place. Now, founder number one does not necessarily need an investment at this point. Maybe they do, maybe they want one, but they've already started the process and they're already making sales. Now, here's the great part, the catch 22 is that the person who was waiting for an investor is in a worse place to get an investor. So maybe they made the greatest pitch decks and maybe they made all this data and spreadsheets and all this kind of stuff. The person who didn't spend the time on doing that, they might not have as great of a pitch deck, but they're much more likely to get an investment because they've proven that they can actually go out there and make sales. So if I'm investing in something, of course, I'm going to want to invest in the person that got in front of customers and created that miracle, right? Which is the miracle of the market responding to your product and service and actually paying for it. One of the quotes that I have in the Founding Without Funding book is that the market votes with dollars and everything else is commentary, right? Money talks. And at the end of the day, you could go years trying to promote a product, sell a product or service, and not sell anything at all. Sometimes it just does not click, right? And so it's very important to get out there and try to sell it because you may have to change your entire product or your entire service or your entire offering. You may have to completely change the way that you're getting customers, that you're selling customers, and you just don't know until you get out there, right? And so again, the market votes with dollars. The market is going to tell you whether or not this product or service is going to work. Now, you have to give it that chance, right? I think that's the biggest thing is a lot of people don't give it a chance. Just because you put up a couple posts on social media trying to promote your product, that doesn't mean that the service doesn't work. So when I say that the market's going to tell you whether or not the product or service works, I mean with a good amount of actual chance to get it in front of the market, right? Because you're not really going to know. So I'm talking about actually putting together a little budget, even if it's very small, $1 a day, $2 a day to spend on Facebook or, any kind of meta ads that you want to do or any kind of online marketing, right? So at least getting it out there in front of people in a systematic way, automating the emails and the flow on the back end, like we talk about in Founding Without Funding, and also making sure that you're following up, you have them in a CRM system and all that kind of good stuff, right? So when I say that the market is going to decide, and I say that you may want to change how you're approaching things if nobody's buying it, at the same time you have to make sure that you've gotten it in front of enough people, make sure that you've gotten it in front of the market for the market to be able to tell you whether it works or not. So we're talking about actual ads, we're talking about real actual social media, reaching out to people, sharing it in groups, and doing more than just posting a couple posts on your social media hoping that somebody's just going to pop out of nowhere and purchase your service. one of the things that I always talk to people about, especially with some of my earlier businesses, people wonder, well, how did you do 250,000 in a month? How did you get to the point where you took an event company that started from nothing when I was 15 years old to doing $250,000 a month in revenue? And they'll say, well, how did you get so many customers and all this kind of stuff? And they're trying to do the same thing, right? Maybe it's with an event company as well. Maybe it's with a different company, but they're trying to essentially go from a zero or a little bit to 250,000 a month in revenue, and they're wondering why what they're doing is not working. And at the end of the day, I tell them it's not really a secret how I did it. It's that we got people to pay for the offering, and we dialed it in until they did, and then we scaled it up. And that's one of the things that luckily I'm great at doing. One of the things that my company, Your Digital Business Partner, specializes in and helping other businesses is essentially putting out that offering, organizing and automating the back end, the text, the emails, the follow-ups, making sure they're all in a CRM, they're followed up with correctly, they're organized. And that's essentially what it is. So at my company where we were making 250,000 a month in revenue, we were also spending $40,000 a month on ads. And so I tell people people weren't just jumping out of nowhere to give us their money, right? We ramped up our advertising and our marketing budgets at the same time as we ramped up our revenue. And obviously, when we were only making, 20,000, 30,000, almost all of that was going back into ads. Only later, after we built things more up and ramped up the ads exponentially, now we're spending 30, 40,000 and then making 250,000. But the point is that we took that money that we were initially investing in the ads and we didn't take money out. We kept reinvesting and reinvesting into ads. And that's something that you're going to see that I love to talk about. And one of the themes throughout Founding Without Funding, as well as my business, Your Digital Business Partner, one of the things that we preach is that you have to invest in ads. One of the things I talk about in the book is that even when we were broke, even when our businesses were struggling the most, even when we had to cut other bills, we had to stop paying ourselves, whatever the case was, we never cut the ad budget. That is extremely important. If you cut your ad budget, then there's no room to grow. You're going to be stuck in a hole that you cannot get out of. So we won't take personal paychecks. We will, fall behind on a bill, whatever it takes to not cut the advertising budget, because the budget is what's going to get your product or service in front of the people. So it's very important that you give your product or service a chance to get in front of people before you say, yes, it did work, or no, it didn't work, right? And then you can scale it up. If it does work, you can then scale it up. And one of the beautiful things about today is that using Meta and other ad platforms, if you find something that works, you invest enough to get a conversion rate going, you make that conversion rate work, and you can dial it in and try to cut your costs down and raise your profit, and then you can scale it to infinity. And that's what's so great. Like no other time in history, in the last 10 years, using Meta specifically, as well as other ad platforms, but mostly Meta, you have access to the most powerful advertising tool in the history of the world. You can spend $1 a day on ads, or 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is, and you can scale up immediately. So there's really been no time like this in history where you can say, hey, I have a business that works. Now, instead of investing $100 into a local flyers that I'm giving out, if that works, the $100, then $1,000 will work. And if $1,000 will work, $1,000 a day works, and you're still making a profit, and you're still doing what you were doing with your business, then at the end of the day, you can ramp up to 10,000. So it's absolutely an amazing time to be running a business. It's especially an amazing time to be founding a business, doing what we're talking about, to be able to found it without funding, because traditionally that would be impossible to come up with an idea, get it out into the marketplace, immediately get it out in front of people, and then as soon as you see that it works, be able to instantly scale it up to literally infinity. And so you need to take advantage of this time right now where this is possible without needing an outside investor. maybe investing a couple bucks of your own. All you need is your, logo, your website, and your product or service. And then, as I said, even $1 a day on meta ads will get you enough data to start seeing if it's working or not. It will get you customers coming in, get you people's contact information. It'll let you lay your offer out to them, and that way you can either make the sales or get feedback of why it's not selling, or even more importantly, make the sale and then get feedback from it as well. Why did they buy it? Why are the people that are not buying it not buying it? So that you can adjust everything. So that's very important. And again, just an amazing time to be in business. That's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, is that so many people can benefit from the times that we're in, and so many people wait around. I talk to so many people, the different places that I go speak. I have 2 books previously on running businesses. My first book was called Never Had a Job, because I started my first company when I was 15, that now does multi-millions of dollars in sales per year, as well as 10 other companies. So I've never had a job, right? I never had a W-2, never clocked in anywhere. And so uh, between that book and the responses I get from that book and the places I go speak and all that kind of good stuff, there's so many people who have great ideas. And people will come up to me and say, I have this business, I have this great idea. I think that if I just got an investor, I could make this happen. Or people pitching me asking for investments, right? And they're saying, if I just get the money, I could do this. And they'll even say, I have a great pitch deck. It lays everything out, exactly what we're going to do. But I know, especially as a founder and somebody who runs businesses, that everything about that deck is going to change. Everything about those predictions that they have is going to change once they get into the real world and the market slaps them in the face and says, hey, this idea doesn't work, or this iteration of this idea doesn't work, or it's going to cost too much to acquire a customer for this idea, to where we're not going to be able to make this work financially, right? So the thing is, there's just so many people that they have great ideas. A lot of them have way better ideas than I ever had, right? And I hate that these people are stuck at that point where they don't start. So I always tell them, just start. Put something up, put something out there. If you have a product or service that you're trying to sell, then put it up somewhere. I mean, you can make a website for essentially free, a couple dollars. I even have the company, Your Digital Business Partner, where we can make all that stuff for you for extremely cheap. And I mean, without raising outside capital, right? Some of the things we talk about in the Founding Without Funding book is, yes, you're going to have to put up some of your own money. But in this case, where I'm talking about, we're talking about 30, 40, $50, 100, 200, $300 to get everything set up that you can put aside, right? We all have things that subscriptions we could cancel, or dinners we could go without, whatever the case is, to where we could put a couple dollars aside every month and make sure that we're able to do this. And so when you do this, just get it out there. And so that's what I tell people when they say, I just need an investor. I just need money to get this started. Well, first put it out there and see if it works. And then I always tell people, and this kind of really clicks with a lot of people, $1 a day. That's all it takes on advertising to see something, to see action, to see if people are even going to click on the ad in the first place. That's the first step, right? Are they going to click on the advertisement and even come into your system? And then you're talking about your conversion rate and how many people you're actually going to sell after that. But again, so much can be learned in just the first day of your business, just by putting up, a website or a landing page with an offering, and then putting a couple dollars into advertising. I always recommend at least $5 a day. You're not really going to see much results without that, to be able to kind of gauge it. But I always tell people it's as little as $1 a day, because it really is. Facebook will let you go, Facebook and Instagram will let you go down to $1 a day. And at the end of the day, at least it's better than sitting there waiting for an investor. Because again, once that, once those people start coming in, once your product or service is out there, things are going to change, and the market is going to tell you how to proceed. And I can almost guarantee you that it's not going to be the way that you had put in your original pitch deck. And I can almost guarantee you that the finances are not going to end up like it looks like in your spreadsheet, right? And I can tell you that I've had businesses where the entire business model has actually changed. Not only that, I've had a business where the entire industry that the business was in changed just because of the way that it all came together and by following what works, right? You happen to fall into a product or service that you offer, or you happen to have customers asking for something, or you happen to have the tools and the staff in one company to where you say, you know what, we could attack that industry and we could do well with this staff, with this company, with this name, with this logo and website, whatever it is. We could attack this whole other industry, and this company is already set up to do it. So, one of my biggest things is you don't know until you start. You don't know until the market tells you. Again, the quote from my book: the market votes with dollars, everything else is commentary. And here's the main key for founding without funding: you don't ever get to give the market a chance to vote if you don't start, right? If you are sitting there waiting for an investor, you're never going to give the market a chance to even vote, to tell you whether it's a good idea or not. So if you're a person that's waiting for funding to get started, you're essentially waiting in Never Never Land, because you're not getting out there and letting the market tell you whether it's a good idea. And what happens a lot of times to potential founders or entrepreneurs is they fall in love with this idea so much, and they focus on, pitch decks and stuff like that, and trying to get investors. And you can fall in love with this idea so much and then it doesn't work at all. And literally, there'll be people, they've spent years of their life. This is my idea. This is the idea. As soon as I get funding, I'll do it. And maybe they even find a way eventually to either get some funding or some help, or they eventually say, you know what, I'm going to do this myself, kind of like I'm talking about. But here's the thing: it can be devastating when you find out that that whole idea you've been holding on to for years, or that you've been planning, and in your head you think that all of this stuff is going to happen from it, that it's going to be so successful. It really kills your momentum and your dreams when you find out that it doesn't actually work when you put it into the real world. When that miracle doesn't happen, again, the miracle of the marketplace responding to your product and service with a purchase, the first time that happens, it's called a miracle, right? It is the market showing you that you've came up with something of value that someone will purchase. And until that happens, you're basically flying blind. You're just hoping and wishing. So again, to kind of come back to that tale of two founders that we talk about in the book, essentially one founder is out there actually making things happen. The other founder is out there focused on getting an investor. And you know what? Maybe the second founder meets with 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 investors. Maybe now they have a big network of investors. But at the end of the day, who are those investors going to actually want to invest in? Somebody that just has an idea and a PDF, or somebody who actually had an idea and went out and made it work, and the market responded and showed them that it worked. So that's kind of the strange paradigm of it, right? Is that you can spend all your time making great pitches to investors and actually going to pitch investors and putting the work in on that side. But in reality, even without a pitch deck and without knowing any investors, founder one is still more likely to get an investor because they actually went out and did the work. And then here's the great part about it: is that founder one probably no longer needs an investor. Now, could they want one? Of course they could want one. Can you get an investor to pour fuel on the fire once you have created the fire? Absolutely. But the thing is, founder number one no longer actually needs it, as opposed to founder two, they're still at step one and they do need it. But the point of founding without funding is to show founder two that you don't need it, that you need to get out there, that the investor is not going to decide if your business is a good idea. An investor is not going to decide if the market purchases your product. The market is going to decide that. So, big key for today: the market votes with dollars. You need to get out there and actually try your business. That's the first step. The first step is getting out there and trying it, because at the end of the day, you're just sitting and hoping and waiting and dreaming. And then again, it really compounds, because the more you think about it and hope for it and get your hopes up on this idea without any action, the more it's going to kill your momentum and your spirit when it doesn't work. right? And so you can't be so attached to an idea that you keep trying to do it even when it doesn't work. Now, of course, you want to be persistent, but again, if you've got done your job and you've gotten it in front of the market enough for that the market should have responded by now. Now, that's a gauge that you have to make, right? And I understand it's a hard kind of call to make of, did I really get this in front of enough people? Again, if you didn't do ads and funnel people through a funnel into a CRM and follow up with them, automatically and systematically, you most likely did not give it the proper chance. That's kind of the bare minimum of giving the market a chance to respond. People aren't just going to jump out of nowhere and start buying your product. You're going to have to put it in front of them, going to have to advertise, get them the information instantly, and then be able to follow up with them, right? So if you've given it the best actual chance and you see the market is not responding to this, you need to be able to move on to either change that idea, switch it up a little bit, try to figure out what's going to make the market purchase it, or you may have to let that idea go or that product or service go and move on to an entirely new product or service, put that in front of the market and see if the market responds to that. Now, some founders, especially the more visionary type, almost like founder number two that we talked about, just very in love with the idea, it's hard for them to let that go because they're passionate about the idea or they're passionate about the product or the service. Especially nowadays, there's a lot of social causes behind businesses. Some people start businesses simply for that cause to help something on the back end, some kind of social cause. But the point is, a lot of people get very invested in their product or service, and then again, it does not work. You can't be that attached to it because I'll tell you what happens. If you change that product or service, if you don't change it, nothing's going to happen, right? You're going to keep not making sales. But if you change that product or service, even if it's completely different and it doesn't align with your wish and your vision when you started, you know what's going to happen when you make your first sale? You're going to love that product or service. The fact that it's something that you or somebody at your company came up with, and then the market responds to it, and you feel that miracle. Let me tell you, after founding 10 businesses, there's no better feeling than that miracle, that first miracle of that company's first product or service being purchased. It's literally something I call my business partners about or my friends, and I say, a miracle just happened. It's funny, if you know me, you know this, that this is what I actually do. I'll say, a miracle just happened because it really is. And it's such a great feeling, especially if it was your idea, obviously, your idea, your service. And again, maybe it's not the one that you dreamed of initially. Maybe it's not the one that you wanted to work initially. But what I'm telling you is mentally, you're going to love it now. Once the market has responded to it, maybe it's not exactly what you initially wanted to do, but you will become passionate about it now because in reality, the market actually responded to it. And if you create a miracle, which is what this is, it's nothing short of a miracle to put out a product or service and have the market respond to it. If you create that miracle, you're going to be passionate about that, right? And so, a lot of the times, you hear the phrase, follow your efforts, not your passion, right? And it is true. Of course, I follow my passion. I'm passionate about being an entrepreneur. My first book was called Never Had a Job. This is what I love doing, but it's also what I put the work in and put the effort into. And it kind of aligns with what I'm talking about there is that whatever actually works is you're going to end up being passionate about it. And let me tell you, especially when it starts putting money into your pocket, then it's going to make you passionate about it. So it could be something that you never thought would be passionate about it. I didn't really think I would ever be very passionate about real estate. I ended up having my real estate license and my mortgage license, owning a national lender, owning a real estate brokerage, investing in Airbnbs, buying commercial property, all this kind of stuff. I never thought when I started business or when I was 15 and I was doing music and events and all this other stuff, I never thought that I would be that passionate about real estate, but I became passionate when I became good at it and I had companies that had that miracle happen of starting to make income, and B, making money from it, right? You will start to feel passionate about something if there is income coming in. It might not be your quote unquote passion that you wanted to follow for life. But at the end of the day, if it's putting food on the table, especially if it's putting a lot of money in your pocket, it's something that you're going to become passionate about. So again, don't let your own preconceptions, don't let your pitch deck, don't let your imaginary spreadsheet about what you think the sales are going to be stop you from getting into the market, getting your offer in front of people, and creating that miracle and being flexible enough to be willing to change and adjust and maybe even take on a whole new vision because the vision that you originally had didn't get a response from the market, and that's okay. You can change, but the fact is, you need to get out there and get it in front of people. Stop waiting on an investor. Stop waiting for people to give you money. You do not need permission to start building a business. You can start right now, and that's what Founding Without Funding is about. We will go ahead and wrap up today's podcast. Of course, the book is out on Amazon, Founding Without Funding, if you want to read more about it. And I also have the course at foundingwithoutfunding.com if you want to dive in deeper. But we will be back with tomorrow's podcast to go in a little bit more into depth into this concept. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow.